Hi, Anna Marie Pittella. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning, Peter. How are you? It's good to see you.
Doing great. Um, so I appreciate you just taking a couple of minutes just to kind of sit down and just kind of discuss your practice. We've known each other, I guess, for what seems to be like the better part of at least 5 years, if not more. What's kind of interesting is for people that don't know, Anna Maria and I are both part of the National Association of Divorce Professionals, which is a great organization that kind of, you know, as the name describes, focuses on divorces and people kind of going through the process. So I've only known you really through the real estate matter of this, but really that's kind of like a byproduct of what you really do, which is family law. How long have you been practicing?
Decades, decades. Um, yeah, no, I've been in practice 50 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we'll leave it at that. But
Well, so let me just tell you a little bit because when I first started my practice, I was it was social justice time. It was Vietnam War, all that good stuff, and I worked for a legal services office and so on and so forth, and was a great experience. Um, but my heart really turned towards helping families. And that's been my concentration since then. Um, I've never been a big fan of litigation. It was the only thing available when I first started practicing. So I was fortunate that other methods of helping people resolve their family issues came into being, primarily mediation and collaborative practice or negotiation. I do not step into a courtroom anymore unless just to put through an uncontested divorce. So my whole goal is to not create a more difficult situation for a family when they're trying to split up, but to try and make it as best as possible so that they can go on with their lives, particularly when they have kids, because those kids are going to be part of their lives forever. And then you're going to have all sorts of events, weddings, graduations, soccer games, everything from the that to the first day of school. And those are all things that kids cherish. So trying to have parents not leave each other in a hostile way only helps the kids in their lives.
so you bring up two good points that I initially when I thought about that, right? And children, right? So having children to begin with is a life-changing event, right?
You betcha.
And we were talking about kind of having kind of these conversations when you do get married, like, who's going to take on certain roles, etc. What I've kind of, I guess, through my years, I've heard that, a lot of divorces happen in the first couple of years of when you have a child, right? Because it's a lot of pressure. Nobody ever said having children was easy. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but you're trying to figure it out. So, and then the second part of what I've heard is there's so many people that have children. I remember being at a Tony Robbins event. He goes, "Do you know how many of you guys are out there just waiting for your kids to graduate high school so you can divorce each other?" So, like, is there a trend? Is there any sort of accuracy to those kind of two statements that, a lot of people get divorced at a young age, the child's young age, or when they graduate high school?
Yeah, it's all over the place, honestly. I mean, I've had people who have decided to get divorced if they've been married for 6 months without any kids. I've had couples who have had one, two children, maybe married 5 years, 6 years, sometimes a little bit longer. They get a divorce. Kids are in high school or facing high school, they get a divorce. Graduating high school, they get a divorce. And then, as you sometimes after the kids are out of the house, if you haven't divorced, you kind of settle into separate lives. But at some point, you start going back to those problems that you were experiencing, and that opens up another door. So we have this thing called gray divorce now, which is, I guess, 60 and over, although I'm not sure it's actually framed in any particular age group, where they just don't want to be together in the last years they have on Earth. So it's all over. I think a lot of it depends on people's fortitude, their fears of what might lay ahead, the cost, and just I think the uncertainty of it all may cause some people to delay making decisions, even though they haven't been happy with the marriage for a very long time.
So how do you so and I know a lot of people that fall into this category. How do you help somebody that like that last statement that you said that have been in a relationship that they know that they don't want to be in, but they're kind of hamstrung because guess what? They can't really, they're almost codependent to survival based on each other, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. So I always suggest that they go for some counseling together, because there's always a possibility that they can start some sort of communication which will find out what's going on and give them some really good tools to address it, right? Because these people fell in love at one point and they felt something attractive in each other, and it was enough to get them to say, I do. So the question is whether or not that can be resurrected or assisted, supported, so that they can stay together. If they come to the realization that that's not going to work for them, then I think the better course in my mind is not to go straight to court where you're going to become enemies. It's John versus Mary right from the get-go, and you're stuck in court events that, again, position you against each other. I think it's the best thing for most couples to look for a process which is going to let them ease out of their situation. Nothing's going to get overlooked. It's not going to be a situation where you're going to lose anything by going into those processes, but it's going to give you more control from the very beginning, just by scheduling. You don't have to be at a court event when the judge says you have to be there. You're doing this either in the privacy of an office or on remote these days, but you're handling all the same issues. And the results are not going to be dramatically different than what happens in court. There are ramifications for every situation that have to be taken into consideration.
Right. And you mentioned something that I think is true, is where the results aren't going to change, right? And a lot of times, like, people try to game it a little bit, and
Right.
kind of leading up to the situation, they start playing nice again until
Right.
all the legal realities kind of set in. And
Exactly.
yeah, so
And the
uh,
cost. I mean, the problem is the cost of litigation is less money that a couple has for their own future. So, why not start working on an agreement from the get-go rather than waiting until the end when you're kind of emotionally and financially drained? It just doesn't make sense to me.
right. And what happens if one party's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not going to sign anything, like in those circumstances.
Well, I work with a lot of divorce coaches,
Okay.
and reality has to set in at some point that they can't stop somebody from getting a divorce. That's just not going to happen. So you're either going to get pulled in screaming and yelling, or you're going to at least be involved in the choice of the process and in the results. So which would be better?
Right. And it's difficult, right? Because like a lot of times, like the scenarios that I find myself in, and again, this is where the real estate stuff comes in. We might transition a little bit to that, but it's they can't afford to live somewhere by themselves, right? And that's I can't tell you how many times I hear that story, right? And it's like, yes, we have a lot of equity in our house, but I can't buy you out, or you can't buy me out. So kind of again, because that's how we know each other. How do you deal with those scenarios? Like what's kind of a guideline there?
Well, the reality of life is that it's about choices, right?
Right.
So you always have to weigh the options that you have and what are the realistic possibilities. And yes, for some people, there may be no other choice but to sort of have a marginal line in the house and live together until something changes. That happens. But, if you're working with the right people and they can help you sort out what the reality of your situation is, um, you can consider even options moving out of to a different state. You can, depending on your age, you can think about moving into over 55 community. There's possibilities sometimes of sharing households with family members or just roommates. There's things you can do if you want to pick those choices. But yes, is it a situation where there's absolutely nothing possible that you can either one of you can do? Then I guess you're going to have to sort how you're going to live together.
Okay. And you do some other stuff. You don't just do, so does it, this is one where it gets really complicated, but redoing your wills and estate planning, especially pre and post the divorce, do you handle that as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everybody has stuff, right? So when you die, somebody has to handle where that stuff goes after they pay all your bills. So if you don't have a will, then anybody can show up and try and be your administrator of your estate. So the will is basically a planning document so that you could get to pick the person that handles your estate. And especially if you have kids, if you don't have a spouse or ex-spouse, takes care of the kids physically and as well financially. So it's all about decision making for the future. If all goes well and you have a long life, then everything's going to be great. But if you should have an issue and you don't have a will, it's not going to be so great for the family you leave behind.
It never is, right?
You know.
It's I always think that everybody feels bad for the deceased, but yeah, I always kind of look at it's like the deceased is the one that's got the easiest way out right now, or like
Well, right. It's that I forget what the comedian was, but his wife asked him if what do you want it, what kind of funeral arrangements he wanted, and he said, "Oh, just surprise me."
Yeah,
So
it's so true. But there's so many things. So what? All right. So people just they're not sure what they want to do. What would be the first step? Would they contact you, get a consultation? How does the process work? Just talk about it. Thankfully, I've never had to go through this. So
and that's a good thing. Yeah, it's always information, right? I mean, it's the same thing you do when you're, listing a house. You got to get information about the house. You've got to get information about the people. You've got to find out what their future plans are going to be. These are all the same things that have to be done in any kind of marital situation or even doing a will or, anything like that. It's working with somebody that you're comfortable with, and it's making sure that you have questions and your questions get answered, and then you decide the step that you're going to take.
okay, and here's one, and we were talking about this before we started recording. It's like from the real estate side, I basically I cater to the individual more than I do to a geographic area. I know that you're based out of Red Bank.
Correct.
Where like, do you cover the whole state? Like, are there any limitations as to what you are willing to do or not willing to do?
Well, now that Zoom is here, uh, um, I really don't limit my practice to any particular county. And I don't go to court, so I don't have to worry about traveling to a courthouse. So the work that I do in mediation or in collaborative practice is basically I've done as far down south, Atlantic City, and I've done some up in Warren County. So it's all over the place, depending on what the couple needs and what they're willing to do. It's same thing with any other attorney I'm working with. It doesn't necessarily have to be the attorney in the same town.
Okay, fair enough. And again, just because I think that people tend to think that they have to, they sometimes they just don't know what they don't know, right? And
Mhm.
they feel that they're going to go to the guy next door, even though he could be the worst person on the planet, and it's just a matter of convenience versus quality versus convenience, I guess. So I always like to look at it. So if you can have both, take it, but take the quality over convenience all day long. So how would somebody get in touch with you?
Well, they can call me on the phone or they can reach me through my email. Either way, I always make it a point to get back to people. I offer a reduced fee for a consultation. So that's a help to people just trying to kind of figure out where they're going. Um, and I try and make sure that people feel comfortable when they come here or see me on Zoom. I guess that's just as well. I can't offer you coffee or tea but under those circumstances, but come to the office otherwise.
Yeah, and I'll vouch. I mean, I think I started off by saying every time we go to a meeting, your smile is always contagious. So just
Sweet.
because I always feel welcomed when I'm around you. So, and if how tall are you? Just for the record,
Oh my God. Are we going to go down that road?
because we're like the best couple on the planet. We were sitting at the table next to each other. So,
Let's say that I'm a miniature. Does that help?
and I'm a super size. So,
Right, right, right. So we are the tall and short of it all.
so we cover everything in
Very
the
pleasant.
yeah.
Right, exactly.
Is there anything that I'm missing that we haven't touched that we should definitely be talking about? I know, we talk about the family law, the collaborative, you know, the real estate side of it, and children. I think that the children part's probably the most important, but that's just me personally. That's where I'm always kind of my heart gravitates to. Is there anything that we kind of left out at this point, or
No, I would just suggest that anybody who's thinking about their relationship and some issues that exist, that they first try counseling. And beyond that, make sure that they find out the options that are available to them. If you go to an attorney who only practices litigation, you're only going to hear about one thing. If you come to my office, I'll tell you about litigation. I'm not going to support it for most families, but I have told people there is no other option based on your situation. You're going to have to go to court. And that's usually when there's things like domestic violence or there's spouses who are hiding assets or it's not willing to cooperate as far as providing support or maintenance, that sort of thing. So but I am going to tell you about the things that I think are best for families in most cases, which is either mediation or a collaborative process. As attorneys, we are obligated to give information on all possible ways of getting a divorce. But unfortunately, I think some attorneys don't press enough information out there and concentrate in just one area, and that's the way they see it should be done. I'm not saying I'm faulting them. I'm just saying that's their experience. I've litigated in the past. I know what it does to families. My concentration now is trying to find some resolution that's going to give them peace and direction, but not destroy them financially or emotionally any more than it can.
right? And I think that's sound advice. I also wanted to mention one thing because one of the things that I learned from being part of the group is that, kind of the telltale sign is that when people get married, there's so many different people involved in the process. And there's the flower person, the caterer, the venue, the priest, or the religious person. And it's just really when people get divorced, they just go to one person and they leave it in those hands. And I just think it's really important to know that as people are going through a difficult process, there's teams that are behind them to kind of streamline the process and take some of the emotional part of it and just kind of get the best resolutions possible for them.
Absolutely. And I've said that for years. I train people to become mediators. I train people to become collaborative practitioners. I've used that same example time and time again because there's just too many pieces to a divorce, and the one person can't do it all. And you need specialties, people who are in different specialties to really help you sort out that particular matter that needs to be addressed. So, you go to an attorney, their fees are usually the highest. if they're doing a parenting plan, it can sometimes be pretty cookie cutter. If you go to a coach, a divorce coach, or you go to a family counselor, you can get something that's much more calculated to reflect what's important to the two of you and what's needed for your children. So you're going to get a better product all the way along. So you can't think of it as one person does it all. It's just not the kind of a world we live in. And again, you're spending a lot of money, so you need to make sure that you're saving money, not spending it all.
Right. Yeah. And I just appreciate your honesty and your input because a lot of times people are just like, no, I'm gonna fight for everything. And it's like, what are you really fighting for? I've seen people that have so much equity in their houses and it's just because they contest everything and they wind up actually owing money at the end of the day. And I'm like, how did that happen? Right.
Right. There's so many stories down the at the courthouse about people who've gone through all their assets and left with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for that very situation. And that's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy.
Right. No. So, Anna Maria, I can't thank you enough for this. I hope anybody that's watching this got some real good value of it. Hopefully that you're not going through a process, but if you are and you just need some guidance, we'll post your contact information in the notes below. If you want to just kind of say your phone number and your email address in case people don't pay attention to those things.
Sure. It's 732-842-6939. And my email is AMPITTELLA@PittellaLaw.com. Two T's, two L's, otherwise it's going to bounce back.
And I'm guilty of that one time. So, Anna Maria, thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you being on here.
Thanks, Peter. This has been so much fun. I enjoyed talking with you.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
See you at the next meeting. Bye bye.